And we wanted to talk to you today about 3 initiatives that are being launched this year, and also this week, and also the importance of this week for the International Co-Operative Alliance and its members across the world. This is the closing event of the International Year of Cooperatives, which was launched a year ago today in New York at the General Assembly of the United Nations. This is the movement's closing event, and the United Nations will hold I think a seminar in mid-November in New York to close the United Nations event, where we will present the first of our initiatives, the blueprint for a cooperative decade, which is this document, which I think you've all had, and show to the United Nations how the movement has come together, coalesced around the momentum that this year has given us to establish a next drive till 2020, when we believe the cooperative model of business should be the fastest growing business model in the world. So that's our agenda. It's an ambitious agenda, but we believe it's perfectly viable. This week you will see the expo, where we have 50 countries from around the world with their exhibits. It's the biggest ICA expo ever, and has attracted a great deal of interest from all sorts of cooperatives. And what's interesting to us is that many of the bigger cooperatives have helped to sponsor the smaller cooperatives who are present here and who wouldn't, under their own steam, be able to be here. So we're delighted to have such good coverage, also from the developing world, from what I'm calling the airplane economies, from Brazil and China and India, who are well represented here in the expo. We also, of course, have this wonderful exhibition of cooperative living, which has been built by the cooperative group to demonstrate the integral and fundamental relevance that cooperatives have to the lives of people and to their communities. And I hope you'll go and enjoy it and look around whilst you're here. We also have a special General Assembly of the International Cooperative Alliance, and we have something like 850 international delegates here who are meeting to confirm their support for the blueprint for a decade of cooperative growth, also to receive the latest details of the World Cooperative Monitor, which is the successor to the Global 300, and will show the value of the largest cooperatives in the world and the size of the movement globally. And the Director General will talk about that a little later on. And we're also here to launch an initiative that we have just, the International Cooperative Alliance has just acquired from Mid-Counties Cooperative, and its Chief Officer Ben Reid is here, the .coop registry and registrar activities, which means that the .coop domain name on the internet will be in what is always, I think, by the co-op movement, including Mid-Counties, regarded as its natural home, which is the global cooperative movement. And we can then continue to drive the sales of the .coop domain name across cooperatives across the world. So that's why we're here. It's a very exciting moment for the cooperative movement. And if you've been in the opening ceremony and heard the discussions about the value of cooperation and the fact that we put people at the heart of it, you might like to contrast that with the activities this week, or just the last few days, of UBS Investment Bank based in Zurich, which has just announced that it's making 10,000 people across the world redundant. And even yesterday in London, locked out 100 of its traders from their London offices. Quite the opposite, or the antithesis, of a people-based decision-making business. So I think you can see the difference in approach that we take. So I want to hand over straight away to the guy who made our keynote speech today, and who we're delighted to welcome to this meeting, who's having a new refocusing the FAO on the role of cooperatives and the value that the FAO and cooperatives together can do. And I'm delighted to introduce Jose Graziano de Silva.
Thank you, Pauline. Let me say that for FAO it's very important to join efforts with the cooperativist movement. As I said in the open speech, the hunger combat needs to mobilize all efforts available around the world. And we know the potential that the cooperativist movement have. First, because we will have to improve our production until 2015 by 50%. And the cooperatives nowadays are responsible for half of all the food produced in the world. And there's even a second, more important reason. There is no way out in this new world, global world, for small-scale producers and consumers if they stand alone. This is a crucial notion that we need to incorporate. And the cooperatives means that. Put efforts together, work together. So in this sense, especially if we focus on Africa, that is our main problem. We are losing the battle against hunger in Africa. Africa improving daily millions of people, pushing them to nourishing and hungry. And that means that the next generation will be lost if we don't solve the problem now. Children that does not eat properly will not be able to find a good job in the future, neither to provide enough and feed their family. So this effort, especially with the proposal made today by Mr. Paul Flowers of the Cooperative Banking Group, that we work together to put a fund in Africa to promote cooperativism in Africa. And I would like to support fully. FAO already has a trust fund in Africa. That means Africans feed Africans, that we got support from several countries in the region. Not all countries in Africa are poor. And also we have support of big international companies, on oil producers, mineral exporters, banks for that. So I do believe that if we can join our efforts in this, we can solve the problem of hunger in Africa. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and I can tell you that Paul Flowers is at the back of the room. If anyone wants to speak to him afterwards, he'd be very happy to talk about the global development problem. I'm sure you will. I've never known you short of words, Paul. So he'll be delighted to talk to you. It's a very powerful initiative that we've been driving for the last year. So he's here if you wish to speak to him, and thank you for endorsements. Would anybody like to ask any questions of Mr. Da Silva? Because I think you want to take questions now rather than at the end, yes? So anybody has a question for Mr. Da Silva, then let's take them now.
Anyone, my name is Shmuel Stenau. I do represent the second largest paper in Finland called Master Business, which has good interest in agriculture and cooperatives. And by the way, I'm from the academic circle myself. I'm a researcher. Now, these points that you mentioned about African hunger in Africa, brings me to the WSSB 2002, which was organized in Johannesburg. Now, the focal point of discussion by that time was, in fact, poverty prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, 10 years after this, now the cooperative luckily comes into the picture. Now, according to the prognosis of FAO, by 2030, about 183 million people will suffer from undernourishment in sub-Saharan Africa. This exactly. Are you not late? Isn't FAO late? What measures are you going to? What strict measures are you considering? Is it so that poverty should be defined and then find plan of implementation as it happened to the sustainable developments, which actually the plan of implementation opened much room for cooperative thinking? Thank you.
Well, it's not only sub-Saharan Africa. Unfortunately, also in the north of Africa now shows an increase in the number of malnourished people. We have these last figures that we just came out weeks ago shows 83 million more African people and Arab-colored countries together. So what we are doing in Africa is basically to improve the resilience in the North area, especially in the countries in the Sahel and the Horn of Africa, to face the draw that is recurrent year after year, the worst situation in the area. And we are working with the other countries to promote a small-scale increase their yields in the area. One of the key issues for them is better seeds use in the area. I can go to details on that, but the main message is that Africa becomes the priority. Africa became the challenge, not only for FAO, for the whole world. Because we find, if you look for what is happening now on the conflicts on Mali, and if you look back on the conflicts that we have in the north part of it, if you look back at spring Arab countries, the food insecurity was the base for the insecurity in the whole area. There is no possibility to have security if you have food insecurity nowadays. And it's not possible in a global world to have food security only for a country or a region. Or we achieve a global food security, or we will be seeing more and more this conflict and this destabilization conflicts all around the countries.
Thank you.
And just on that, at that point, it was very interesting to read the comments of the new director of the World Bank, Dr. Kim, in an FT article recently where he wrote that the World Bank is now refocusing. So when you say, are we late? I think everybody will acknowledge that while there's a hungry child in the world, that we're late. So the World Bank is now refocusing on abolition of hunger and poverty, and that his comments were, but we will ensure that the benefits of any growth in prosperity are shared across the community. And that's our space, that's exactly where cooperatives are. So we believe that we've got a strong agenda with the World Bank, with the FAO, and with our cooperative colleagues in Africa in building the grassroots agricultural economic activity. And that's what we're determined to do, and the Global Development Cooperative is one of our tools for achieving that.
Thank you.
Please.
What impact does...
Can you say who you are?
Oh yeah, my name's Richard Goulding, here with Red Pepper, Manchester Meal, which is a local pot, as it happens. And what impact does political instability and authoritarianism in the global south have on the cooperative movement there and its actions? And do cooperatives have anything to offer towards solving these problems? Like in a political sense as well as in a purely economic sense.
Well, what we know is the conflict, let's say, is the apex of the destabilization process in the country. So it affects everybody, all, including cooperatives, of course. We know that there is let's say, a close relation between hunger and conflict nowadays. I used to say to the Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, that these issues of food security should be discussed in the Security Council in the UN, not only in Rome, because they have a potential of the destabilization. We see now rich countries facing problems with this massive migration from the north of Africa. We have, for example, the last Somalia crisis. More than 2 million people crossed the border to the Arab countries, putting the countries like the Gulf countries that are rich countries under alert. Because 2 million in a country that Yemen, for example, that has 20 million, means 10% migration, massive migration. That is something that we never saw in the past. So really bringing a more stable environment. It will help not only cooperatives, it will help the world.
I think that one of the arguments we can make for the cooperative model of business in that context is very clear, and that is that we believe that our model of business is probably the single most successful ever initiative in the reduction of poverty across the world. And we've done that on the back of member-owned businesses and all the social and environmental elements that are run alongside that.
Sou Lídia Costa, da revista Gestão Cooperativa, canal Cooperativo Brasil. A produção de alimentos e a questão ambiental. Como que as cooperativas podem produzir alimentos com sustentabilidade?
This is just yours, I'm afraid.
I can translate it.
I understood the question.
I can, yes. She asked how cooperatives can help to improve food production in a sustainable way. One of the challenge that I presented in my keynote speech today was asking the cooperatives movement to support the voluntary guidelines on land, tenure, fisheries and forests that has been just approved by the World Food Committee on May in Rome. For those that are not familiar with, the World Food Commission is a joint forum of governments, 130 governments, civil society and private sector. Cooperatives are there, represented there. And they took 2 years discussing around the world to agree on this voluntary guideline. Now it's time to implement those voluntary guidelines at country level. And I asked the cooperative movement to join us. If we follow that rule, we'll be able to improve production in a sustainable way. We have the technology. Technology is not the problem anymore. And we need to achieve scale up this technology that is available on a pilot basis. This is what we need to do. And I believe that after Rio +20, sustainability is a notion that has been in the DNA, I'd say, of development. We cannot talk anymore about development without, at the same time, talking about sustainability.
Okay, I'm going to hand over now to Director General of the ICA, Charles Gould, who will talk about the other two initiatives. Chuck.
Thank you, Pauline. Well, first let me mention the domains.coop work, and this all involves the high-level internet domain .coop, which is called a top-level domain like .com, .org. .coop is one of those that was established 10 years ago when the internet was first opened up. So it's one of really only a dozen or so top-level domains that today exist, although there are plans to expand that. And ICA is just very appreciative of the gift that Mid-Counties Cooperative has made to us of two important businesses that are central to how .coop operates. One of these is a registry operator, so it keeps track of who owns what .coop name, like there's an ICA.coop we own. The registry operator keeps track of that. It also keeps track of where to point that when you type in ICA.coop, how does it get to the right computer? So it keeps track of all of that. So that's a technical business that is part of the gift. The other business is domains.coop, which is a registrar. And the registrar is responsible for selling the names. It has the right to sell names. And those might be individual cooperative names like Mid-Counties Cooperative.coop, or it might be a rubric like Best Cooperative in the World.coop. It can be anything. And the registrar, while there are a number of them around the world, the registrar that Mid-Counties established and has now transferred to ICA is responsible for something like 80% of the .coop names that have been sold. So it's the dominant seller of these names. This is very essential to where ICA is going. The gift comes at an especially opportune time. Our priority strategy in the International Year of Cooperatives has been to raise public awareness of cooperatives. You can't do that without a digital strategy, especially because we need to engage youth and the next generation, and you have to find your next set of members where they live, and they live digitally. And it's essential that we are at the center of that strategy, and this allows us to be there. When you read the blueprint, which Pauline mentioned, you'll see one of the 5 core strategies is around identity. And you'll see inside that a digital strategy is essential for ICA and for cooperatives to really carve out our role as a distinct model and not part of .org and not part of .com. We're a distinctive cross model. So when Mid-Counties suggested that they would be willing to explore with us whether ICA might be a more natural home for the next stage of the development of the .coop domain, we were very keenly interested and did the due diligence that is necessary. And our board looked at this carefully and decided that, in fact, we believe we are the right home for this next stage. There will be sessions here, meetings here, with the resellers of .coop. And these are a handful of people in different regions who have been selling the .coop names. And we want to explore with them, because of their knowledge of how this works, how the market has responded, what the business opportunities have been and what the challenges are. We want to explore with them how we should take advantage of the new strategic opportunity that is presented by .coop now being inside ICA, which is a different kind of organization than Mid-Counties, and which has members in 100 countries, and to see how we can leverage that membership and that network to really take .coop to the next level. Again, none of this would have been possible without the generosity of Mid-Counties Cooperative and without the leadership, the personal leadership that Ben Reed, its CEO, has brought to this, and his vision for how this could be an asset that could be unleashed to much greater advantage if it were set free, if you will, from what they had done to develop it. So with that, I'll turn over to Ben to explain why he got into this in the first place and why he sees us as the right next step.
For me, is the end of probably a 12-year journey, 10 or 12-year journey. .coop was created as the only organisational top-level domain name probably about 12 years ago. But it was acquired by a PLC company, a private company, and it went into private ownership. And I have to say, Pauline, myself, and I must give credit to Bob Burton, who was chair of Cooperatives UK at the time, didn't believe that this was right. We sat and thought about ways of bringing that into cooperative ownership. And in the end, the only way that could happen was for the predecessor society of Mid-Counties, Oxford, Swindon and Gloucester Society, and the West Midlands Co-op, the two that came together to create Mid-Counties, to actually go and buy it. And we had to buy this from the private company. It cost us a considerable amount of money, and I have tried to convince Chuck throughout these negotiations we ought to at least get that money back, but he's not been impressed. Why did we want to do it? Because we were passionate about using this as an identifier in the world that we're all going to be moving into, have moved in. 10 years ago it looked different than it does now. Absolutely now, the justification of making sure you can identify who you're trading with, that they are a bona fide co-op by using the URL at the end, now makes sense to everybody. 10 or 12 years ago, we were having a tough task trying to sell that idea. However, the boards of the two societies supported the two chief executives, one of which was me, the other was Bob Bilton. We bought it. Spent the last 10 years developing it. We have turned this into a nice little profitable business. However, it is clear that sitting in the centre of the UK, we do not have the international reach that will allow this to fulfil its potential. And therefore the board of Mid-Counties reviewing it accepted a recommendation that we would offer it to the ICA. We believe that was always the intention, to allow it to fulfil its potential. We've had really difficult negotiations with Chuck, because he's on your behalf, he's a very tough negotiator. But in the end, we have agreed to do that. Why do we do it? Because at the end of the day, the motives of Mid-County's board in acquiring the transaction is to see this fulfil its potential. Success for us now, when we look back, will be to see .co-op be the brand that says whoever you trade with, if they're a co-op, they use that. So individuals should use it, companies, society should use it, and that will be our reward going forward. So, you know, we are delighted to place this now with the ICA.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Ben. We're going to take questions, I think, probably at the end now. And do you want to introduce the World Cooperative Monitor?
I will do that. ICA has published for a number of years now something called the Global 300. And this was a raw ranking by turnover of the largest cooperatives in the world, the 300 largest. And we have done this with ICA staff on a part-time basis, gathering data in various ways that we could. And we reached the point where it has a good reputation, it's solid, but it's inadequate, and it needed to move to the next stage. And the next stage was two levels. One, it needs a more rigorous methodology than we've been able to provide it. And two, it needs to move beyond simply the largest 300, because none of us feel comfortable that that's the best way to depict the rich variety and diversity inside the cooperative sector. So on the first point, to deal with the methodology, ICA has partnered with EURICSI, the European Research Institute on Cooperative and Social Enterprises at the University of Trento in Italy. And they're a very well-established, respected research institute that is already the best source of European cooperative data. And we've partnered with them to expand the database beyond simply the 300 largest cooperatives. And I'll let Carlo Bozzaga speak to that in just a second. We then looked at how we can provide for more meaningful information than just turnover. And we've begun to look at how to collect other kinds of financial data, but also social data and social questions. It's difficult to get. So what we have is a beginning process. And we're relaunching this today as the World Cooperative Monitor, because it is more than just the Global 300. We want to be able to tell a story of the sector. We'd like to be able to double the database at least beyond where it is, but this is already 10 times where it was before. None of this would have been possible, again, without support from significant cooperatives in the sector. And so we had 5 sponsors who were essential to our being able to develop this kind of a database and collect this data. And they're listed here on this banner behind me. Some of them are here in this room, as Desjardins, who you've heard from earlier. It's Credit Cooperative as well. It is OCB from Brazil. It is IFCO from India, and the Cooperative Group, who are one of the co-hosts here for this week's of activities. And they each have financially supported, as well as supported emotionally and with solidarity. There is a scientific committee that each of them has been invited to also put a representative on, so that the data we interpret is not only scientifically rigorous, but also meaningful from a cooperative business enterprise point of view. So with that background, let me turn to Carlo, who I know could speak for hours on the data, which he loves, but I know will speak for minutes on the top level business.
Academics normally take a lot of time. Now, as Charles said, this is the first step of a larger project. We started mainly to put together the database and to collect data on to novel and not on social impact. But in the next years we will develop a questionnaire. We already have a questionnaire, and then we hope to be able to to give much more information. We had a lot of methodological problems. We tried to solve them. The most important problem is that cooperatives, as you know, are active in different sectors, and sectors using different economic indicators to measure their business. And this creates some problems in merging and having the unique data on cooperatives. So we decided to use turnover for all the cooperatives except mutuals and banks, use income on premiums for mutuals, and use net banking income for cooperative banks, which are more or less the measure with the same meaning for these different sectors. And we used three main sources: a questionnaire. Some cooperatives answered the questionnaire, not enough to develop also social indicators, but we hope next year to be able to develop also these indicators. Data banks available from different sources, Van Dyck, Amadeus, and so on, and also data directly given by cooperatives or by cooperative associations. And we were able to establish a database of 2,190 cooperatives, large cooperatives, based in 61 countries. It doesn't mean that we were able to collect data on all the largest cooperatives, but we hope on most of them, since we cover very well Europe, because there are several data banks available. We don't cover very well, for instance, Eastern countries, Asian countries. So we need to go on. What we can say is that these are at least 2,190 cooperatives now are on our data bank, of which, of this sample, almost 1,500 have a turnover over $100 million. So can be defined as large cooperatives. 1,500 more or less. Again, at least 1,500, because probably there are others and for the future. Based on 46 countries, and since the project is a continuation of the previous one, the Global 300, we separated the top 300 cooperatives. They come from 24 countries, and they have a turnover of about 2,000 billion dollars. 1,975 billion dollars, which is more or less. We cannot compare really, but to give an idea, it's more or less the GDP of Italy, more or less. Obviously, these are data on turnover. Turnover takes into account also the expenses, but then more or less to give an idea of the size. These are near one half comes from insurance cooperatives and mutuals, and the other comes mainly from the other types of agricultural cooperatives, water cooperatives, and so on. But we can find all the data, the ranking, and so on in the volume.
Okay, and the books people have been distributed. So, any questions either on the Mid-Counties Initiative or on the World Cooperative Monitor at the back? And please just remind everyone who you are. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Donna Balkan from the Canadian Cooperative Association. I have two questions, and one is about each initiative. About the .coop domain, you talked about the resellers. Will, for example, registrars like NCBA continue to be selling .coop, or will it be completely centralized within ICA? I buy all my domains from NCBA, for example.
In the States?
Yeah.
For everyone else, that doesn't get that.
That's part of what we'll be discussing with the resellers. We have no plans to change that, and we value that relationship, and certainly it makes a lot of sense. The NCBA is a good model because they have access in the U.S. to all of their members. we suspect that we would like to move toward a model where more of the apex organizations were involved as resellers, since they could then reach deeper into their countries. So that's what we need to explore. There continues to be, in addition, an NCBA involvement in the .coop business. They also were one of the early sponsors, and that is continuing, although we're having discussions with them currently about how that might all be rethought given ICA's involvement now.
And my other question is about the Cooperative Monitor, which is fascinating, and in particular the top 300. I noticed that there are a number of mutuals that were included in the Global 300 or top 300 this time that were not in the original one, including CAMIC, which is the Federation of Mutuals in Canada. Did that have anything to do with the resolution in Cancun last year about including mutuals in ICA? Did it have to do with methodology? And the other part of it is that number 234 is a mutual in the process, I think it's 235, is a mutual that is in the process of demutualizing.
These are 2010 figures, Don.
Okay, so if it demutualizes,
Sure,
will it
be
be
on the
taken
list.
out of the database?
Exactly.
Because I've reported on the demutualization plans, and I need to know whether or not to name them, to not name them. They have not yet demutualized.
Okay.
Mutuals here are mutuals which are still mutuals, so not in process of demutualization. The other problem is that federations are, we decided this is one of the problems we have and we will have also in the future, if we take the single cooperatives or the single mutuals or the federations or the groups. So this is one of the problems we have to solve for the future, because obviously if we take the groups, the larger cooperatives, but what is a group? A federation is a group. For instance, we had the problem, we had a discussion about cooperatives, consumer co-op in Italy. They have a common business. Now they manage the business, but they have separated the cooperatives and they don't like to be represented as a group. So this is probably the Federation of Canadian Mutuals was in the previous one, is not here. The single mutuals, you can find the single mutuals if they are big enough, but not a federation, because it's only a federation, it's not a group. Instead, some banks, which are real group, they have a common strategy, a strong common strategy, they are included. So the database is mainly on co-ops, single co-ops, with some groups.
With some federations.
You call federation, but we call consortia. Groups, but only when there is a very common business, when they manage the business in common. We will decide in the future, in the next year, how to put the threshold between groups and non-groups. This is matter of but in any case, if we include, if in the future we will include also groups, more groups, the numbers will grow. What we want. The idea is to be sure that this number will not decline, except in case of mutualization. They can only grow, because we stayed at the minimum level. We kept the minimum organizational level. For instance, we excluded the insurance company, Italian insurance company, owned by cooperatives, but since it is mainly a for-profit, it's managed as a for-profit company. Unipol was in the 300 before, now it has been excluded.
Sam Giddy, freelance. I think this is probably either to you, Pauline, or to Chuck. Just following on from Donald's last question, it would be quite helpful to have an update on where the ICA has got to in terms of welcoming mutuals into the movement. Perhaps we could have a little bit on that. But my question was really going to be a broader one, which is that looking through the World Cooperative Monitor, there are companies in here which in terms of their behaviour probably are pretty well the same as shareholder companies, in terms of their behaviour, in terms of their governance, in terms of the way they operate. And I wanted to ask if that was an issue, whether that was a problem, and in a sense how you can strengthen the idea of the cooperative brand as something which means more than just a form of legal ownership and something to do with ethical business. So.
You want to respond?
No, you can.
I guess what I would say, first let me address the mutual question. And We, in terms of getting on with welcoming mutuals, we're very welcoming. In terms of applications for processing, there aren't new applications that we're processing. The motion last year that was accepted in Cancun was not so that we would necessarily begin an aggressive strategy to bring them in. Many mutuals are members of ICMIP, and we think that's the right place for them to be, frankly. They get very business relevant information there. We would like those who would also like to be part of the global cooperative movement more broadly, cross-sectorally, to feel that they're welcome, and then not to feel that we're going to require them to jump through a lot of hoops and question their worthiness. And I think that was the symbolism and the importance of the resolution last year. We do have mutuals in membership, and we probably will begin to ramp up a little bit some of the conversations with some of those. But this was not intended to be a doubling of membership by aggressively bringing mutuals directly in. We also are having ongoing conversations with ICMIP about how to ensure that we have the right kind of relationship to help them service their members and make them aware of what they can benefit from an ICA membership as well. But that's a more thoughtful conversation that will occur over the course of the year. In terms of the behavior of organizations on the list and whether that's a problem for us, in terms of gathering the data, it's probably not a problem looking at their numbers and whether they fit. I wouldn't want to say that it's not a problem for us if they're not behaving according to the values and principles, and that's obviously something we want. And I suspect every list has that problem. But it goes to something that we've put in the blueprint as well, which is that we need more sophisticated indices of cooperative performance. We need a new definition of sustainability, of growth, of efficiency. And as long as those terms are defined only economically and not socially, environmentally as well, then we have an inadequate measure of performance. And if we can get agreement on how you measure good performance in social sustainability, environmental sustainability, as well as economic performance, then I can imagine a global 300 and a World Cooperative Monitor that would be a three-dimensional measurement. That could be a very interesting document to look at. But in the meantime, we're dealing with raw financial numbers.
I'm Jean-Louis Bancel. I'm the chair of the Banking Association and sitting on the board. Maybe to add something else, I do believe to be on the list, it's not a label telling you a good or bad card. This is not the point. But I mean, when we launch the Global 300, what we had in mind was also to keep pride of being a card. And it is very useful, I mean, to remember the members of the companies being listed there, that they are cards, and they can push their top management to remember how cooperative they could be. And I could give you an example in France, which I believe is very interesting. It's our colleagues from Crédit Agricole. You might have known that last week there was a huge meeting in Brussels for the Crédit Agricole. And it is good they have been pushed by being on the list, second on the list I think they are, remembering they are cards, and they have to be deep-rooted in being cards. So I do believe it might have an indirect effect, and it's a kind of reverse takeover, reverse cooperative takeover, okay? Telling the members, those they are not only listed on the stock exchange, they are also cards. So I do believe it might have a good effect, and so we have to push on other things. So that's something I believe which is interesting.
Thank you very much, Jean-Louis. They're number 8 actually on the list,
okay.
Crédit Agricole. But I think you make a very important point, and we have similar experience, I think, in the UK, Ben, where Cooperatives UK opened its books to mutuals. And some mutuals joined, and I think what we've seen over the years is those mutuals getting actually more and more closer to us in the way they operate. And I think that's one of the things we think we need to do. We're always encouraging best practice, we're always encouraging democratic ownership and democratic procedures, and I think these things when people see the value of them and they've got a structure that allows them to do that, then they do tend to open up more to it. And part of our process is to keep all our members on the ball in terms of their democratic ownership, their active membership policy, the principles that they're following, their ethics of their businesses, and these things I think are valued and enhanced when you're part of this process. More questions? So what? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Emily Barker from Co-Operative Press. It's quite a basic question, but what type of social data were you using to create the monitor, and how did you actually decide to use, like what kind of areas, like how did you decide which social data would be relevant to cooperatives?
Can you?
What are the social data?
Yeah, what
because yes, we started with a questionnaire also for collecting also social data about membership, the type of membership, women, men, and so all other information. But the problem was that obviously when you start such a project, it takes a lot of time to also to make the cooperative to answer the question. It's not easy. So we collected only 100 questionnaires on 2,190 cooperatives on the database. Also because you didn't have the database at the beginning, because we went together with the questionnaire and with the building of the database. Now we have the database. And now we can use the database also to send questionnaires, both to a sample of this 2,190 or to all of them. And it will be much easier from our experience as the researchers to collect also social data. And obviously we hope for the next year to provide also social data or on a large universe we collected, or still on a good sample of these cooperatives. Now we know that we have 25% of the largest cooperatives are in agricultural sector, 43% are mutuals. Okay, so we have now a database which allow us to go on with, for instance, samples, for instance, to look at or to have financial data to develop new indicators. The indicators used to analyze cooperatives are the same for profit. They don't work because cooperatives often are cost maximizing organizations, not profit maximizing, because they maximize the cost of labor, because they maximize salaries, or they maximize the cost of the materials because they maximize the income of the farmers. So it's completely crazy to use ROI and ROI to do this indicator. But using the database, we can collect on a sample more financial data, and this will allow us to develop also new indicators of efficiency and performance.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll close the meeting and people will be around if you want to talk to them. Thank you very much.
Good.